call the lawyer today.
What?
I still love you, Mike.
What?
Why do you think we should be together anymore?
Okay, coming up.
Why we should be together anymore? By your husband, Michael. What'd you write?
You've done so well. You have. I love the house.
You said farmhouse. You said 40 minutes out of the city so the kids could be normal.
Love the kids.
You love the house. You love the kids. You've got your husband scared to death. What a big honking wife day for you.
I don't know you anymore. You're vague to me.
I'm vague to you? Lady, I just had your brakes fixed.
There was an important conference about Joshua tonight. How could you not have been there?
Is that what this is about? Come on, I had a very important presentation to finish at work.
This is about I don't have a partner anymore. And people here are beginning to forget who you are.
Okay, you know what? It's possible I work too much.
Name any one of our children's teachers.
Gym teacher. Why am I not allowed to love my work?
You are. You're just not allowed to love it more than us.
We loved each other. We
What the hell? Hey, Bob, could you hear that clip or no? Oh, you did. You got the clip. Okay, good. Okay, so now let me get the worksheet up. But so it's interesting. By the way, you can notice the name. So the character's name is Michael, and he said, "Do you know any of Josh's teachers?" Gym teacher, right? So this was straight out of my dad's own life. He felt this way. I mean, he was working so hard with television that it's sort of feast or famine, right? You're working really hard for a certain amount of time, and then when the show's on the air, like night and day, and then when you're not, you're at home all the time. But my dad had a string of successful shows, and he just wasn't home, and he really had this sort of conflict with my mom. I don't know that she ever called a lawyer, but. But it was that feel, and it's funny the way that he, hey guys, yes, still together, thank God. But the way that he addressed it, funny enough, was to write a show about it, which I don't know if that's what my mom had in mind, but I guess since it only lasted one season, he was back home, so that was. But,
how do the kids feel about it?
Yeah, how do we feel about it? Well, no, it's interesting. I remember him not being home a lot, but then when he came home, it was obviously very exciting, and we always had a great relationship. And now you could argue, oh, he's home too much, you got. But no. I mean, but then when he would take us to the set, I mean, there's nothing like that. That's such an amazing experience to see what he's doing and the people that he's reaching, see like the live studio audiences. And I was always his biggest fan. I always loved all of his shows. And those shows were very much teachings for me. And they were also very loaded with Jewish values and lessons. But the reason I bring this up, I don't mean to just wax personal. I think this is something that affects all of us. And we all go about that balance in our own ways and sort of feel like something's got to give, something is sacrificed in the end. But I want to turn to Moses, and I want to turn to, this is a teaching that was taught by Rabbi Jeffrey Fox. Jeffrey Fox has his own version of what my dad went through, which is that he was a pulpit rabbi. And
They're never home.
Yeah, never home. He was never home. And he ultimately decided, once he had a family and he was missing a lot of the kids growing up and all that, he decided that he ultimately had to step away from the pulpit. I don't want to scare anybody. This is not what I'm thinking. I'm good. I'm not going anywhere. But this was his own experience, and he ended up becoming. He's now the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Maharat in New York, which is actually an Orthodox women's yeshiva.
Jerry, isn't that your? Jerry and Shu, their parents were friends.
Yeah,
We knew Jeff when he was born and all the way through.
No, you're kidding.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Well, I'll be teaching texts that he taught me. And then I've added a couple others, but the bulk of it is what he brought. So that's wonderful that you had that connection to him. But so that was sort of, and he then wrote, I think a book, but also this text that he came out of his sort of reconciling. How do I balance the two? And he found resonance in Moses' story with his own kids. By the way, what are the names of Moses' kids?
Gershom
Gershom.
and the other ones.
Gershom and the other one, right? But that's exactly right. It's Eliezer, right? But the point is, do we hear much about them?
No.
Right? They're kind of out of the
I
picture.
think they're mentioned like twice.
Yeah, they're mentioned. That's actually great. It is twice, right? So that was part of his point, which is if you're Moses, and he was talking about preachers' kids, PKs, but clergy children, where it's like they are sort of out of the picture because if you're going to be Moses, you're so busy. What time do you have for your family, for your children? And so he sort of explores some midrashim around that. So let's dive in. This is the first text is actually not about his biological children. Who wants to read? This is from Numbers. The people are complaining about meat. They're in the wilderness, right? Give us some meat that we can eat. We're tired of this manna stuff. Who wants to read from Numbers? Go ahead, thanks.
Did I produce all these people? Did I engender them? That you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a caregiver carries an infant to the land that you have promised an oath to their ancestors?
Great, and you might recognize a word, the last Hebrew word in the first line, ha'omen. We've done a lot of midrashim from the beginning of Bereshit Rabbah, which talks about the Torah being an oman, or maybe even an omen to God when God created the world, right? And what did our midrash say that Torah was? How did it make sense of the word oman? That's okay. I know. Now we're getting quizzed. That wasn't part of the deal.
Maybe so be it.
Oh, amen. Oh, like an interesting amen, sort of like I agree, or maybe so be it. But no, the Torah was like a blueprint. Remember, sort of like just like a scribe doesn't just build from nothing, but so God used Torah as a blueprint. Anyway, so that word that triggers a lot of midrashim around it. But here it also means a nursing mother.
Amen. Yeah.
Right. Omenet. But the question is, why isn't it omenet? And it's saying, oh, because it's masculine, so it's Moses, which is sort of interesting. It wouldn't be in the masculine if we're talking about a nursing, like a wet nurse.
Not anymore. Men can do the same things also, except certain things.
Right. Well, that's if we're talking about literal biological nursing, then it would be limited to.
This now that the reverse is that the wife is working and the father, husband is taking care of the kids.
Correct, 100%. But I just mean literally the act of, right.
הוא לא מניק, אבל אומנת זה לא רק מניקה. אומנת is taking care.
Yeah, right. But I mean the literal physical biological breastfeeding. That image is being evoked for Moses. It was in the masculine. Just the rabbi sort of riff on that, and that's how they make sense of it. That it is referring to that actual suckling, but Moses as the wet nurse. Yes, Jared.
I guess because we just finished Purim, but it sure looks like Haman as well.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Confused. I don't understand what this sentence or this paragraph means at all.
Oh, great. So let's take a step back. Yeah. So Moses is sort of looking to God and saying, hey, what is the deal here? This burden is beyond what I can give. Since when did I become this people's mother?
Okay.
Right now they're complaining they don't have meat. You told me to let my people go, and I've you picked me to be a leader from the start. I said I'm not the right person for that, but you had me do this. But now I'm supposed to field all of their incessant complaining.
Mm-hmm.
How am I supposed to feed them all? Am I literally? And it's interesting, the milk and meat, right? They're asking for meat, but I'm saying I only have milk to give, right? And but anyway, I'm not the mother. I'm not their mother. Go ahead.
It brings to mind, am I my brother's keeper?
Am I my brother's keeper? Right? And the answer is always, yes. So and that's the case here too, right? God doesn't say you're right. You don't have to lead them anymore.
So we're busy talking about suckling a kid, and the answer is quail.
Right.
It's meat. It's meat. It's not milk.
Yeah. Exactly. No, I think that's an interesting connection. But so
What's the word that's translated engender?
let's see. Did I engender them? Yeah. Lita Tihu.
They didn't give birth to
Yeah,
them.
like I didn't give birth. Holy.
So engender is a euphemism?
Yeah, I'm not sure. This was the Safari translation, but give birth is actually even better. That was just the
That's
default.
kind of my point.
Yeah.
Would you tell us, when we did this class where they said that every translation is an interpretation?
Yes, yeah.
Right, and I'm arguing that the interpretation and gender is a poor one.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree.
Yeah,
Give birth. Did I give
never
birth?
used the JPS translation, I always pitched a Fox.
Yeah, yeah. But good. So did I, anyway?
And I don't mean Fox tips.
What's his name? Fox. The Fox. Yeah. So basically, did I give birth, did I give birth to these people that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a caregiver or wet nurse carries an infant to the land that you've promised to their ancestors. But so did anybody feel like that was their experience of work? Or it was as if it was beyond just sort of this like 9 to 5, I clock in, clock out, but more like a all consuming, like since when did I become the parent figure? Or since when did I feel like I'm carrying this whole organization on my shoulders kind of thing? Does anybody?
Always on call.
Okay.
Yeah.
My son had a job like that. 3 o'clock in the morning was okay.
Yeah. Good,
Yeah.
exactly right. So when you're always on call, yes.
Once you become a parent, you're a parent forever until they're, like, I have a 42-year-old daughter who I'm still carrying a lot.
Okay, so literally becoming a parent, but it's sort of like beyond the child rearing ages. It's sort of, it's a life sentence.
I mean,
It's a life sentence,
So to
all right.
well, I mean, she needs me that way, but
Right,
it's like, am I ever gonna not have to be that?
good, absolutely, yeah. Let's go Helena, then Sheila, yeah,
Definitely in my job.
right.
I had many times that I had to go and leave sick children at home and go
Right.
work. And I remember vividly something that I'll never forget. My son was about 5 years old and I had to go in the middle of the night and he would hug my legs. Please, mommy,
Oh.
stay with me.
Heartbreaking.
So it's heartbreaking.
My kids.
Yeah, Sheila?
There's always this discussion when you have a 9 to 5 job that you're not doing enough. In other words, there's a negative connotation about it. If you are going to be
Yeah.
successful,
Yeah, right. Yeah,
whether it's financially or otherwise, or creatively or whatever, you cannot work 9 to 5 or 8 to 4, whatever. The point is
Right.
that you are going to have other hours. And the thing I know what we did with my kids, we always told them, yeah, but your father can come to your programs in the morning sometimes.
yeah,
There were compensations for all that.
right. So there are drawbacks where like,
You have to make.
Yeah. good, you have to force it and look for the opportunities that it creates, right? So like the morning programs, at least you're there for that, right? There are ways to make it, but that idea that there is this sort of expectation that if you're just doing the basic 9 to 5, which should be enough, like that's a lot of life, right? But it's sort of, there almost becomes this expectation that if you're not going above and beyond, you'll never be truly successful. Go ahead.
Yeah, as an only child, I want to comment about what that lady said,
Uh-huh.
about always being a mother. My mother encouraged me to be very independent and self-sufficient. She was always there for me, but she'd often refer to me in the presence of others as my child. And I said to her, why do you say that?
Uh-huh.
Her comeback was this. She said, when you go to for an interview or whatever, they ask you about your family background. They don't say, how many adults do you have? They say, how many children do you have? She had a comeback for everything.
Funny. It's good, Jerry.
Yeah.
Well, the point you're making has become much more acute now because we have people with their cell phones who literally are on 24/7 in situations where in the past it wouldn't have been.
Right.
Yeah.
So they don't turn off the office when they go home because the office with them.
Yeah,
Even a bigger problem now.
absolutely, right? Emails and sort of like the paper, you used to be the pager, but still it's like you can take your work with you everywhere in the palm of your hand. So that's what Heschel says, or there's that conversation I brought where it's like you cannot, there's no, in the, I think it was Ezra Klein on his show or Judith Shulevitz saying that you can no longer retreat in space. You can only retreat in time, and that's what Shabbat offers you. Because space now, there's no place you can go where you're truly off the grid unless you're like.
Shabbat is like when, but still not, you're still
Right, then
really
you're working on
working.
Shabbat.
And
Yeah.
what's worse if you don't write,
Right, yes. Remember things.
go home, and every time someone had a comment, this one's in the hospital, this one, I had to count them on my
Oh my
finger,
God.
and there are 5 things I have to remember.
Oh, my gosh.
And I
Wow.
have to figure out what were the 5 things.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. Ron, then David, yeah.
I was gonna counter part of what Jerry says. Yes, you have your phone and you're constantly answering it, but I don't know. Most companies these days give you a lot of flexibility in your time.
Mm.
And I mean, mine, you're allowed to work from home 2 days a week. Of course, I'm a special case. I work there all the time. But the other thing is, I was working with the UK office and the Australian office. Of course, I was on the phone in the middle of the night.
Right.
I was always on call.
Yeah.
Because I'm in IT and you're always on call.
Right. So, yeah, that's interesting, sort of
But
modernity and
also
remote
though,
working.
but because of that, you end up with flex time and you're able to be home in the middle of the day to
Yeah.
watch the kids come home.
Good. So that's
Which I
maybe,
don't have.
maybe a perk of sort of
Yeah.
the hybrid model or more flexibility with technology allowing for that.
So-
David?
I was gonna introduce the complication that a lot depends on the type of job and the type of organization.
Yeah.
And most of us who are in a small business situation, on the one hand, you could say you make your own hours. On the other hand, the hours, basically consume all the time. When I say Shabbos is an island in time, it's just what you were saying before, because I think in the small business situation, you can say, well, I'm gonna let this go, which is gonna negatively impact business. I want to do something with the family, or if you never take a vacation, you never take a vacation.
Right.
But when I was a kid, I didn't really appreciate that. My father would get very edgy towards the end of a vacation, no matter how long or short it was. Is the office still gonna be there when I get back? What's gonna be piled up?
Yeah.
Et cetera and so forth. And it really is like that.
Right. It's not really
On
a
the other
switch
hand-
you can just turn off and stop thinking about.
Yeah, on the other hand, in some situations, including some of our employees, they literally come to work in the morning and do whatever they have to do, and when they're done in the evening, they're done.
Mhm.
Because the type of work they're doing doesn't really demand extra attention after hours, if you will. So it just really depends on the type of job and the type of organization and what your position might be in the organization as far as all that goes.
Right. Very good. Yes.
To put it back with parenthood, it has to do with, parenthood as a job could have to do with what your children are like
Mhm.
and what their needs are.
Sure.
Like if you have quote unquote easy children that they go to bed when you want them to, you have your evening to yourself. When my kids were really little, I knew that every afternoon I had a couple of hours when they were taking a nap and they were good. Now, other parents might have been on call the entire afternoon because their kids would not nap or something.
Right.
Or as I said before, if you have a child who has other needs, they might not be a child anymore, but they still need you.
Right.
In that capacity.
Right. So much of it is really case by case, depending on.
So to not scare you about becoming a parent.
Yes, thank you. Yes. And then we're gonna move on.
Spin off for that, on a lighter note, I heard an interview being conducted where they were interviewing an actor. And he said, well, he was going to be going on a family vacation in the car. And he was not looking forward to it. Why? He said, because being trapped in a car with a 13-year-old boy, it's like being trapped in a telephone booth with an angry pit bull.
Yeah, good. Thank you for sharing. Okay, we're gonna move on now. This is our first Midrash. So Mechilta de Rabbi Ishmael, in a section called Amalek. So apropos of Purim. But it's not actually about Purim, but there's that connection. Early 3rd century Eretz Yisrael, we're talking. So who would like to jump in? This is talking about how it says in Exodus that Moses when you remember, he smites the taskmaster and runs off to Midian. And there he's a stranger in a strange land. And the Hebrew is Ger Haiti Be'eretz Nochriya. And the Midrash is going to be riffing off of that word, Nochriya, right? So who wants to dive in? They're saying, what does that mean, Nochriya? What does that mean?
We are strange, not familiar.
Right.
Okay.
Go ahead. Thanks.
In a foreign land, Yeshua says, foreign land, as stated, our Eliezer Hamadeh says, in a land of foreign gods. Moses said, since the whole world serves idolatry, I will serve the one who spoke and brought the word into being.
Okay, let's pause for one moment. So a couple things. There are two positions. Whenever you have one rabbi saying one thing and another rabbi saying another thing, it's a machloket, it's a debate. So let's see what they're debating here. So Nochriya, Rabbi Yoshua says, it just literally means as it is, a foreign land, right? The Eretz Nochriya, foreign land. But then Rabbi Elazar Hamadai says, it actually is referring to a land of foreign gods. Where does he get that? How is he playing?
Yeah.
Good. Nachar, Yah. Yah, like God's four-letter name, right? Yud, He, and Vav. So Yah is a way of saying God. So Nocher, Yah, saying strange gods.
Yeah, is our God, isn't it? It should be Nechar El.
Yeah, but this is Midrash. Yeah. Yeah, hallelujah. Praise God. Hallelujah. Praise Yah is God, a name for God. So Nocher Yah. So Rabbi Elazar is saying it actually means a land of foreign gods. Moses was a stranger in a land of foreign gods. That's going to factor into. So next, Moses said, since the whole world serves idolatry, I will serve the one who spoke and brought the world into being. That's just sort of his rational leap, saying if the whole world is full of people who serve all these idols and foreign gods, right? Idols, doesn't it make more sense, instead of being somebody who just worships the particular idol of this land, to go beyond in scope and say, I just worship the God who created the whole world, right? And we've heard other midrashim, of course, like smashing the idol in his father's terach, his idol shop, his workshop. But this is just another sort of synopsis of that leap that now instead of Abraham, Moses is making, saying, since the whole world serves idolatry, why don't I just basically like go over the head and say, I'm going to worship the one who spoke the whole world into being. That seems more rational.
I have to interrupt and just ask, this is put in quotation marks, which in English would mean it's a quotation. Or at least it's the words of a character in your story, which maybe is what this is meant as, because I don't recall Moses ever saying that.
No, this is a midrashic imaginary conversation that's being constructed.
What he does say is he's going to turn aside and see this wondrous sight. He doesn't say this.
Yeah, no, this is not shot. This is midrash.
Yeah, although one could assume it on the theory that the Israelites already seem to know what Abraham seemed to know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but so just, it's not literal, just saying, this is just sort of saying, I'm in a land of foreign gods. We know that Moses is loyal to God. So Moses, it'll make sense with what's coming, that he's not actually somebody who worships idols. He believes in God. But now we're going to get to what happens next. Sheila, go ahead.
Why do, my usual complaint, why do they have to even bring this up? It's like, my kids would come home with something like this from Hebrew Academy, and my husband would say, the nasty of the week. It's always something, it's always something negative.
Yeah, well, let's see. We haven't finished it. Let's see what the point is here of the conversation. Go ahead, Karen.
For when Moses said to Yithro, give me your daughter Zipporah as a wife, Yithro answered, if you do what I ask of you, I will give her to you as a wife. Moses said, what do you ask? Yithro answered, your first son must serve idolatry. Anyone born to you afterward may serve God in heaven. Moses accepted. Yithro said, swear, and he swore, as it is written, Vayol Moses. This being an expression for swearing, as in Vayol saw the people, and it is written, well, and take 2 talents, etc.
Yeah, they're just explaining what this word that's used in this context, that it is used in other places in Torah and Tanakh to mean oath, like taking an oath. So they're saying when it says Vayoel Moshe, so in Exodus 2:21, that there was an oath that he took with Yitro. It's the language of oath. What is that oath? It's this oath that enabled him to marry Tzipporah, Yitro's daughter. Jethro is the priest of Midian, right? And he marries Yitro's daughter, Tzipporah. And the Midrash, the rabbis here are imagining that there was sort of a precondition, which is, or sort of, I guess, a dowry, I'm not really sure, but a precondition that Moses must raise the first son, as an idolater.
How does he know they're gonna have a son? They might have a daughter.
You could poke holes all around. Like Sheila said, this is meant to be disturbing, but it's also meant to reconcile a question, to address a question. And again, I'm not bringing this for its like standalone beauty. I'm bringing it in the context of a wider conversation that I find very beautiful.
But I'm interested actually in what the context could possibly be, because this is extremely, quote, imaginative, close quote, when you consider what it actually says in the written Torah. So what in the circumstance that Rabbi Ishmael might have been experiencing in whatever period you said he was writing this, I have provoked this.
I love the passion. I love that we're angry now, but I want us to finish. I want us to finish the text. So go ahead.
Therefore, the angel came forward to kill Moses. Whereupon Zipporah took a flint and cut off the foreskin of her son, and the angel let go of him.
Good. So now you know this is addressing a very confusing passage in Torah, which I brought here, which is that, right? So God tells Moses, go back to Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let my people go, right? After Moses had escaped to Midian, God says, go back to Egypt. On their way back, this event happens, which is perplexed commentators for a very, very long time.
Aside, it's short and it's confusing.
Yes. So who wants to read? This is just the context.
We all remember.
I'll read.
Go for it. Thanks.
At a night encampment on the way, God encountered him and sought to kill him.
That's Moses.
So Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched his legs with it, saying, "You are truly a bridegroom of blood to me." And when God let him alone, she added, "A bridegroom of blood because of the circumcision."
Right. So it's this kind of perplexing incident where, for whatever reason, Moses did not do a Brit Milah for his son. And God is very angry that Moses did not circumcise his son, to the point where he basically tracks him down to kill him. But Zipporah saves the day by taking a flint and doing the circumcision and says, "You are now a bridegroom of blood to me." Go ahead.
Now, what are we talking about? The first son?
Yes, this is Gershom, or
Okay.
Gershom, which means I was a stranger there. Gershom. So this is, I'll tell you why I'm bringing this. And, I just want to first understand why this even exists, right? Which people are responding strongly to. Why even write such vile, right? That Moses would let his son be an idolater. That's not who Moses was. That's not something I care to imagine or think about. But the rabbis are freely, and I will say creatively, trying to reconcile what happened here. Why didn't Moses circumcise his son?
Because he wasn't home.
And they're saying it's actually because, and if you look at the language, and they're using this midrashic move about the oath, and that Moses actually said to Yitro that I will accept your conditions in order to marry Tzipporah, that our first son basically it's sort of like, what do you do with intermarriage, right? Like Tzipporah was not a Hebrew. So there's sort of like a shalom bait scenario here where it's like, okay, in order for us to have peace in the household, let's split 50-50. You know, my next son will be raised as a Jew, as following God of the world that I believe in. But the first son will be a Gershom, we'll sort of be a Ger, we'll follow. So I'm not saying that that's what happened, and I don't believe that's actually what happened. It's not in our Pshat, it's not in our Torah, but this is how they're reconciling what happened. And I will say, you can hate it, but I want us to learn it. I want us to know why the rabbis are making these moves. And here's why I think it's so interesting. Because if you look at it, you could say, what was Moses afraid of? Why would he consent to allowing his son to be a Midianite, basically? or be with Yitro and not with him? And the answer is a couple things. One is, and this is what Rabbi Fox points out, which I think is so interesting. He's sort of doing what his own mother did, although for very different and necessary reasons, putting his son in a basket and sort of shipping off to safety, even if that means in the hands of a non-Jew. Right? So that's sort of Moses. You could say, well, what is the safety? What is the worry? Moses, for a number of things, could say, if I am going to be the leader of the Jewish people, first of all, there's a lot of danger inherent in that. I don't want you to come back with me to the slavery, to the conditions of slavery, or to the plagues and to the Exodus and to everything that's going to, and to wandering in the wilderness. It's presupposing that he anticipates that all that is coming. But he may say, this is dangerous. Stay safely with your father-in-law. I'll handle the danger. The other thing you could read into this is concern that, leadership may pass down from parent to child and a sort of dynasty. And maybe he's saying, if I'm going to be Moses, I don't want you to have to be burdened with what I'm going to be burdened with. And that goes back to the very first text that we learned, where he's saying, why are you subjecting me to all of this, to be the mother of this of a multitude of people? So maybe there is also this feeling of like, I don't want that to happen to you too. I don't want you to have to inherit. What is my burden? So I find it very, very interesting, obviously deeply disturbing. But all this as sort of like, how do you respond to the sort of parenthood, work-life, family balance when it sometimes feels like work is asking you to sacrifice your children, which of course also brings us back to Abraham and Isaac, right? Yitro is literally saying, give me your firstborn. Right, so yeah, go ahead.
I can understand it also differently. Like in recent years during the Shoah, during the persecutions in Russia and stuff like this, a lot of the Jewish children were not circumcised. Yeah.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah, because they were scared. And the same thing, Nochriya, Eretz Nochriya. So he may be thinking that he will be in a foreign country where that circumcision is not being done, and he will be an outcast among other children. You have to realize parenthood is different. You have to think about it in a different way.
Right. Yeah, and obviously it sort of backfires, at least for Moses, saying like, I want to protect him, so I'm not going to circumcise him, and then God comes after him to kill him. Moses. So.
And also a lot of when they were going to the extermination in the wagons and stuff like this, they were throwing their children, their babies out to farmers out of the grains in order to save them.
Right. Right.
So yes, can you imagine a parent doing that?
Right.
But it is for the good of their own child.
Right. But so that's such a good example. And I'm thinking of so one of the books that Alex and I have been reading in preparation for parenthood is called Bringing Up Bebe, which is the art of French parenting. The art of French parenting. So Bebe. And one of the things that it talks about is, well, the reason is it was about this American woman who moves to Paris, and she notices, oh my gosh, I'm in a restaurant and these children are actually sitting at the table and they're not throwing their food and they're not having tantrums and they're waiting. What is different about,
some wine.
Yeah, they had some wine. That's what it was. Well, that brings us back to Briss, one of the things she brings up is Doto, who's this philosopher who really is sort of like wrote the book on parenting for French people invoke the philosophy of Doto when talking about child rearing, but he's like the gold standard. But if you look at his biography, Doto himself was a bad father. Like he didn't have time because he was off being Doto. Like he basically shipped off his kids to be raised by others and not him. Which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with nannies or maybe he had guilt feelings. But point being that like there's sort of an inherent. I forgot who mentioned about the 9 to 5. Like it was David about like that's almost not enough these days. But similarly, like if you're going to be a Moses, if you're going to be like an all-star of a figure, that comes at a price. And is it sacrificing your children, if you have family and you're balancing.
We've certainly come up against that quite often as an explanation for why you don't hear about the sons not only in the story, but after the story.
Yes.
Because Aaron's sons continue a hereditary priesthood, but Moses' sons, you hear nothing about them.
Exactly. And this is trying to explain why. What accounts for the radio silence? Why don't we hear about Moses's kids? And one reason is this sort of, well, maybe it was because he really sort of handed them off to Jethro. And the first one, even theologically, religiously. But the other is Moses just didn't have time for them. He didn't have time for them, so they're not in the narrative. But that's a perfect segue to our final midrash that I want to bring from Hebron.
But we don't talk about Joshua's, we don't talk about a lot of the other children.
No.
From Moses
small
on.
little
That's fair.
stuff we're talking about.
That's fair.
I think what would be interesting to know is whether or not Moshe was
We can't hear you.
I said, it'd be interesting to know whether Moshe was circumcised, because we know the vast majority of those that came out of Egypt were not circumcised. They were circumcised. Were they circumcised when they came out of Egypt, or were they circumcised just before they went into Israel?
The heap of foreskins,
Right.
Gilgal or what have you, right before Jericho.
So, I
right
mean,
when they crossed.
if he wasn't circumcised, it doesn't surprise me that his son was.
I think Moses was, and I would just, and I actually don't have a source that I can bring without
I don't think there is.
researching, but I would think it would be that
It
Yocheved.
would be a midrash.
Well, maybe, but or commentary, a parshanut, but I think probably Yocheved circumcised him before putting him in the basket. Like I would assume it
Why
happened
would you
then.
do that?
That point, yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
I have to look up how old Moses was when he was in the basket. I don't think he was like a
We
brand
don't-
new newborn.
Put it that way.
Huh?
We really don't know. It's when.
Yeah, we don't know, but I assume he would have at one point needed to be. I don't think like God would have let him go his whole career without circumcising himself.
Back
If you're looking at her.
go,
About adults, like in the Midbar, being circumcised. Well, we know that an adult who's being circumcised, it's painful. It's a whole operation. Isn't there someplace where they talk about that they were the story with the woman, Tamar, is it?
Yeah,
Where
they circumcised.
sacrificed-
Yeah, they killed them while they were trying to recover.
Yeah. Yeah, let's Jackie, then Jerry, yeah.
going back to the French babies and children.
Yeah.
The one thing friends of mine learned when they were living in Paris, don't let your kid order ketchup. The chef came out of the kitchen with a knife.
Because it's so offensive that you would spoil good high cuisine with packet. Yes, that's funny. That's funny. Jerry, go ahead.
When Moses is discussing this in the Midrash with Yitro, is this before or after the burning bush episode?
This is after. So God.
Well out.
Well, God says, well, it's right after, right? God says, go back to Pharaoh and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. He goes on the way. This encounter happens where he didn't circumcise his son, so God comes after him. But when Moses is complaining, why am I like the nurse?
Yeah.
That's way after. They're in the desert. They're complaining about not having meat. They're tired of the manna.
No, I know, but when it talks about this.
Oh, you're talking about this imaginary conversation between Moses and Yitro? That would have been before. It's before the burning bush because he's still in Midian.
Had a plan laid out for him by God. I mean.
Right.
He's still Moses, the Egyptian prince.
Right.
On road.
Yes, exactly.
Which is basically how he's described. She says, I met an Egyptian.
Mm-hmm. Right. At this point, he is, yeah. So, right, it's sort of this, where does Moses fit in? He's actually got three identities, right? He's Egyptian, he's a Hebrew, and he's also kind of a Midianite, right? He lived in that land, he married, the chief's daughter. I mean, he's got three identities he's working with. Okay, I want to dive into this final midrash here, again from Mechilta de Rabbi Ishmael. This is about, so David's point about not hearing about the Gershom and Eliezer. By the way, the names are interesting, right? It sort of also serves to kind of be like an interesting proof text about the first one.
Yeah.
The first one, Ger, but the second one, Eliezer, God is my help. So it's sort of, okay, well, the second, maybe that happened, maybe this, I'm not saying it happened. I don't want to color on the way we look at Moses, but it's just interesting that this is conversations that our text, our tradition is having, with itself.
Of course, there's this idea that when Yitro comes to the camp, having heard about the great deliverance, he's bringing
Right.
the children. So they were with Moses.
Well, that is exactly what this text is now getting at. So this is asking, so it says, Vayishma Yitro Kohen Midian Choten Moshe. So Moses, Yitro, the priest of Midian, the father-in-law of Moses, he heard et kol asher asa Elokim leMoshe uYisrael, everything that God had done for Moses and Israel, Amo, for God's people. Ki hotzi Hashem et Yisrael miMitzrayim, because God took them out of Egypt. But the question is that this Midrash is asking, what exactly did Yitro hear? It says that he heard. What was it that he heard that spurred him to go now join up with the people of Israel, with Moses and Israel? So what was it that Yitro heard? Who wants to read? Go for it, Jackie, thanks.
And Yitro heard, what did he hear that caused him to come and join Israel? The war with Amalek. These are the words of Rabbi Yehoshua. He heard of the giving of the Torah, and he came. For when the Torah was to be given to Israel, all the kings of the earth shook in their palaces, as it is said, and each king in his palace accorded glory.
So that's a proof text is coming from Psalms.
Well, actually, what's interesting about that is that he heard that they were given Torah, and yet the Torah has Yitro there before the Torah was given.
I know, this is a huge thing. That's a great point, because that's where we get this ein mukdam, that there's no beginning and no after in Torah, that you actually can't necessarily read it chronologically. The rabbis say this all the time, that it's not necessarily presented in chronological order. So again, just like Midrash, they take proof texts and they rip them out of context. Rabbis also say that we're not really sure that it's the Torah as we read it is chronologically consistent, but more so not necessarily intentionally, not so. Just like if you watch a movie that plays with time, it's still intended to do that. So that similarly, Torah sort of may time jump every now and then, and so you can't necessarily say
down like at 500 CE, BCE, then the people have forgotten exactly what happened before what. But let's give them some benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Relying on oral history.
Right. But it's just an interesting, the rabbis mentioned this, that don't necessarily restrict yourself to this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Torah may be playing with time in a way that's interesting. But so yes, that's exactly right, because the Ten Commandments, how could it possibly be, right? That Yitro is there first, but you're not actually sure. The rabbis say we're not actually sure about that.
I was just pointing it out. I wasn't
But the
complaining.
rabbis do it too. So it's a good thing to point out. Okay, so we have a couple of proposals here. What did he hear? One answer is, he heard about the war with Amalek. Like, wow, this people is punching above their weight. They must have something special going on. They must be really blessed by God. The other, that was one position, but Rabbi.
In the Makom, no, in the Yam.
Yes, so that's going to be another one. That's, I think, where it ends here. But so one is Amalek. The second is, and that's by the way why we're in Masechet Amalek here in the Midrash. They're trying.
Yeah, where's
Yeah, in the Hebrew, it's inferred because it's before. If you look at the chapter, it's Amalek. So they've been talking about Amalek for a while here, and so it doesn't actually, it's not included in this passage, but it's inferred by the context of the conversation that they're having. So one proposal's Amalek. Another, then Rabbi Yehoshua says, actually, it was about the giving of Torah, because if we look at Psalms, it says that at this moment, all the kings gave glory. And they're saying that Yitro was a Kohen. He was sort of a king in his own right. So he was among these kings who sort of trembled in response to the giving of the Torah. That it's sort of like even great distances away, people knew and sort of shook. Who wants to keep? Why don't you keep reading?
Interesting play on the word Hatan. He's the Chotain, the father-in-law, and yet, Tzipporah uses, he's a bridegroom.
Interesting.
But I mean,
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, what is it?
Yeah. Yeah, Chotan is father-in-law, but you're saying like Hatan, that you are Hatan Danim, you're, yeah, well, I look forward to you fleshing out a midrash around this. Ron has given me a couple, and I want you to give me a midrash on that.
Yeah. But the fact that that Sipora uses the word Hatan for, Hatan, what is it, Hatan? I mean, Damim it's just interesting.
Yeah,
I know that we lack a vocabulary in Hebrew. We don't have that many words, but it's like a play on the word.
yeah. So I look forward to your drash. Come up with something.
You're.
Oh, that's your job. Okay.
You're the teller.
Okay, at that time, Jack, you want to keep going?
That time, all the kings of the nations convened with the wicked Balaam and said to him, is it possible that God is going to do to us as God did to the generation of the flood?
So the kings are worried. Oh my God, they're hearing all this shaking. This is still about the giving of Torah, right? God has come down at Sinai. There is smoke and fire and earthquake, all this stuff happening. And the kings are saying, oh my God, is God destroying the world again? Like God did with the flood. They come to Balaam, who we know was hired to curse the people of Israel, but instead gave us matovu, right? Okay, keep going.
He replied, fools that you are, the Holy One, Blessed One, already swore to Noah that God would not bring another flood to the world. As it is said, I swore that the waters of Noah would no more pass over the earth. You know, Isaiah. Perhaps he will not bring a flood of water, but a flood of fire.
That's actually, James Baldwin says it, the next time fire. Right, okay, God promised not to kill us by water anymore, but God didn't say anything about, right, fire. But so that's what they're saying. But what about fire? Balaam says,
God will bring neither a flood of fire nor a flood of water, but the Holy One, the Holy Blessed One is giving Torah to God's people and loved ones. As it is said, the Lord will give strength to God's people.
And Oz here, strength, is being interpreted as Torah. So God is giving Oz to be, Oz is Torah. God is giving Torah, yeah.
When all of them heard this from his mouth, they all responded, may the Lord bless God's people with peace. And they turned and went, each to his place. Rabbi Eliezer says, Yitro heard the splitting of the sea and came to join Israel. For the splitting of the sea was heard from one end of the world to the other, as it is said, and it was when all the kings of the Amoree heard.
Good, and that one in Joshua.
And there was another midrash that says that when the sea split, the water split everywhere.
Yes, that's right.
So he would be aware of
that way too. And this actually, the final quote here is referring to when the Jordan split under Joshua. But
that's splitting.
Yeah, but this is bringing proof for like it was that Yitro heard the splitting of the Red Sea and then came. All of this, the point being, Yitro was clearly absent from all of these, right? According to the rabbis, if he heard this from afar, the point is he heard it from afar. And some commentators say that Moses' children were with him, so Gershom and Merari were with him, then they too missed all of these pivotal moments in Jewish history. Right? And this is what Rabbi Fox was saying when he taught this, that the downside here is that for the consequence or sacrifice of Moses being Moses is that his kids they're written out of the narrative. They miss all of these momentous Jewish moments. And I look at that in a couple ways. One is, I wanted to ask a specific thing about this. Which is, well, so on one hand, it's sort of like this, I think. You know, if you are so busy being Moses, then your children sort of are written out of the narrative and they miss this key moments. Maybe it's the baseball game, maybe it's the ballet recital, or, you're missing the moments. Or maybe this is sort of a counter to our first midrash talking about how, Moses said, here, take my kids for safekeeping. Well, what's the problem with that? then they're not a part of the Jewish people. By having this bifurcation, even though you're trying to protect them, by putting them in a basket and shipping them off, they then miss all of these crucial moments. So I'm sort of thinking of like in my own personal life, and then I want to turn it to you, how it resonates with your own personal life, which is, so, okay, I'm not talking about being Moses, that there's no way to be Moses. Never before, never again will there be right? But in my own way, like I want to be the best rabbi that I can be and teacher. And so there's this sort of balancing of how do I give the community everything I can give them, but also give my children everything, God willing, one day that I can give them. But if I separate the two in order to protect the kids, then I've written them out of the narrative of B'nai Yeshurun, where Judaism, all these pivotal moments in Judaism is happening, right? All of the Jewish communal highs and lows and joys and sorrows in Jewish life. So it's sort of this like, how do I incorporate the two to make sure that they are not written out of the narrative, either for their protection or as a consequence of my working too hard? So I want to sort of leave that to you to now respond on how you're playing with it.
Listening to what you say, we can't help but think about what happened during the Holocaust when you gave your kids to the convent,
Kinder transport,
or when you send them away to another country like in England.
Yeah.
In order to not let them convert, but actually save Judaism, saving their lives.
Right.
The alternative would be the end.
Extermination.
Right. No, it's a really interesting parallel. So it's
Right there,
but
so.
there's a desperation there where you don't have right. You got to do what you can to save them. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so I think that, that point is there's a difference between sending them to an environment for their safety where they're cut off from the Jewish people, or, the flip side is it takes a village, right? Where you let the community help take care of them. And in fact, they may get more indoctrinated with Judaism and the Jewish way of life because they're exposed to the entire community.
Exactly. Good, Elliot, and then Sheila. Yeah.
So much of what's been said has been based on the parent's perspective in terms, I'd like to hear more about, I don't want to get off the subject, the narrative that children would write and how all of that ties in with, was it Kibbutz Abba Aim, honor thy father and mother. How do you show honor in this case?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right to point that out, that I'm using the lens of parenthood in here, not from the children of like, we never hear, like, what does Gershom and Merari think of all this? Or sorry, Gershom and Eliezer, what do they think about all of this? And what kind of balance would they have wanted? Did they feel, I mean, you can imagine what they probably felt. They probably felt like proud of their dad, but also a little bit resentful that he's never around. I don't know. I think that's a fair proposal, but you could also say like, no, they understood that he was a pivotal figure that was leading the people and that he sort of had to share them. Growing up, Rabbi Schulweis was a giant in the conservative movement and at our shul. And I think there may have been a sense of like, well, I think he once said like, I am everybody's father, which is sort of actually sounds a bit Christian because that's what they're called, but that's also why they're called that, right? They literally don't have the Christian Catholic priests don't have children or family because they pastor to their flock. Like the church is their family. And I actually understand that more and more. I used to think, how could you do that? Or how could you opt out of if you wanted to have a family? How could you But now I'm having the immense privilege to gain this rabbinic privilege. I sometimes think to myself, this would be so much easier if I didn't have anything else that was tugging at my right. Because if you're really good at what you do, you are there for everybody, and when you need them. And there's always highs and lows. There's always sickness. There's always birth and death and all across the spectrum. And if you didn't have a family that was also tugging at you, you could really be everybody's father or mother. Go ahead. Yes. Let's go. David, Sheila, and then Ryan.
Reminds me of that song, right? The Cats in the Cradle.
Yeah, right.
So.
Well, he's saying it reminds me of Cats in the Cradle, where they just miss each other. At first, the father doesn't have time for the son, and then when the father does have time, the son doesn't have time.
Because I mean, we would be a very different people without Moshe. But I can imagine the children saying, this is what you have to do for this all to happen. And, we're, shunted to the side. I mean, Moses spends all his time, not all his time, but a lot of his time in the tent of meeting. When he's not there, And he has to be veiled when he comes out because he's glowing, right? Which
Yeah.
is a little unusual for most dads, right? And, you know, he's still doing a lot of the hard cases, even though
Right.
his mother-in-law tells him you better appoint judges for the smaller cases.
Oh, yeah, that's good to
Uh,
bring Yitro back in that
so
way about the
he's doing
delegation.
All
Yeah.
these things, plus he's giving all these laws that he's learning from God. So, you know, if I would want to say, you know, what one was involved in business, one was involved in volunteer activities, et cetera, and so forth, and you still try to make time for the
Yeah.
baseball games, et cetera,
Right.
and so forth. Yeah, but what would the child's perspective be?
Yeah, but I also just want to point out something interesting you said, then I want to pass it on, and then we're at time. I don't want to hold you much longer, but so I like that you brought Yitro back because we have him in the Midrash saying that he said, give me your firstborn, basically, right? But then you're saying, remember, he comes and delegates for Moses to say, I want you to have more time. So it's sort of a counter narrative that actually Yitro is trying to help him to be a better father, not sort of, okay, Sheila, then Judy, and then, yeah. And then Ron, I'm sorry.
Being left out really is the Torah. You know,
Right, yeah.
she's just like I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, where is she? What
No,
is she
exactly.
thinking? She's not even, does she tell her kids about the father?
Right.
I
I remember when Moses comes down from Sinai, says, separate yourself, God is coming, prepare yourself for the third day, don't go near a woman. Right, and sort of question is like, yeah, he adds that, God didn't say that, he adds that. So there is maybe the sense of like, was he too removed from Tzipporah unnecessarily? You could sort of go there with it.
Peter Pitzel, Peter Pitzel, but sometimes he used to appear at RA conventions. Do you know who he is?
Who did you say, sorry?
Peter Pitzel.
No.
I've heard that name.
He's a psychologist, a psychiatrist who takes the Bible and he places the people, it's a play acting thing.
Oh, yeah.
What he
Bibliodrama.
has to is, he took specifically
Yeah.
the kids, the Moses kids not being with him.
Yeah.
And one of us was Gershom, one was Eliezer, one was Zipporah.
Yeah.
And they let Moses have it. In other words, they were opting it out, which is really a good
That's
thing
interesting.
for school.
Well, Rabbi Josh.
Well, I just want to make a quick announcement for the next few weeks and then continue. But I don't know if Rabbi Jacobs mentioned, but this is final week until further notice. After Passover, but I don't know if you shared it over the next 3 weeks.
That April, it's you and Rabbi Hal and.
So yeah, the next 3 weeks, there will be a session. We hope anyone who's able to join will come. There still will be lunch. I'm going to be leading a session next week around Passover, and the following 2 weeks, actually, we have guests that are going to be joining us on Zoom, but please come in person for those who are able to come for food. Rabbi Josh Kahan on April 11th, and then Rabbi Matt Berkowitz from Jerusalem on April 18th. Both sessions around Passover. Rabbi Josh Kahan recently wrote a Haggadah, which he'll share kind of about the process of making a Haggadah. Rabbi Matt Berkowitz also, you'll get more information as they come, but there will be sessions, but Rabbi Jacobs, this is his last session until after Passover.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, I'll have one final thank you at the end, but I want to thank you. Judy,
I want to bring this to more modern and to a mother. Golda Meir kept leaving her kids constantly for like months and years, and she felt guilty and the kids resented it also.
Thank you for bringing that up, right? So it's so hard. But she's gold, it's such a gift to us. And what would history be like if, so it's this balance, right? There's no right answer or wrong answers. It's just a hard balance. Ron, and then I'm going to say thank you and let you go.
The point I was going to make is to shoot a hole in the story here, because Moshe was, who knows, maybe 40 when he went to Midian. He had his kids. He was 80 when he left. So those kids weren't kids. They were adults.
Right. But this again is sort of the like.
I know.
First of all, we're not sure about the timing.
We keep on talking about them as if they're 10 years old or something, and they're not.
Interesting. Yeah, but also like, what did it mean to be 80?
Chronology.
Right, but what did it mean to be 80 then. And I also, that's not in, is that in shot or are you saying that's in?
No,
Because I don't think.
I mean,
shot.
it never says what they,
It does
it never
say
says
that
what
he
age
was
they
80.
are, but
I can't remember
you
exactly.
have to assume that he's.
Wasn't it at the end? Because it said that he was still strong.
He was 120 when he died. There's something about the front sparrow was 80.
So again, it's like 80, but if you live to 120, what is 80?
He could have had kids at 80, but he probably had his kids at 40.
Right, but I don't think it's like a contemporary 40.
My children.
I'm just saying, kids weren't as young as we're talking
Yes,
about.
fair.
That's all I'm trying to say.
Okay, sorry that this one went long. Just want to again thank everybody.
You can go on all the time.
And I'm sorry to be leaving, but I hope there's some justification for it in the text that we studied today. I just want to thank you guys. I just have so loved how this community has coalesced around this lunch and learn and how it's grown. And it really has been a great way to not just learn, but to really grow closer as a community and get to learn from each other and know each other better. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah. Pass her around. She's getting used to that.
Yes.